Alright, everybody, welcome to episode 36 of the Popcast Movie Club. Covering another time when England lost in the World Cup. 1986. With the Great Mouse Detective, or Basil the Great Mouse Detective as it was known, at least I think in the UK. I remember the VHS case, and apparently the DVD case, which is absolutely terrible because it's all the generic sort of put a giant colory glittery background on the back and get some artwork from the film. They've done it for everything, even blooming Encanto, because we've just run out of ideas, everybody. I am your host, Ashley, and joining me as ever is AJ.
Yeah.
On location alongside his brother Chris, who was the one that selected this.
Yes.
So, Chris, why did we go down this Sherlock Holmes route?
Because I've always thought this is one of the more underappreciated animated Disney movies. I don't think it gets the attention and the credit it deserves.
Yeah, certainly
especially since it came before the Disney Renaissance.
No, I certainly could feel that sort of from the off. Enough of the whole creation of this thing is tasty enough to make it like Disney did not want this to succeed, and when it did, they're like, oh, balls. But yeah, the other thing that I looked into, because it was like, oh wait, this is a Henry Mancini scored picture, and lo and behold, what did he score 2 years later? Without a clue. The Ben Kingsley and Michael Caine Sherlock thing. So I guess he borrowed the music. But yeah, this sort of like falls in the cracks of like. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the 80s animation is probably really good but underappreciated. Would you say, guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. I think people in the 80s were looking for something darker, something a little more mature and adult. So I think a lot of like the animated films fly under the radar.
And as far as Disney goes, basically everything between the 40s and The Little Mermaid doesn't seem to get as much. I mean, I guess Cinderella was in the 50s and Sleeping Beauty was in the 50s, but those movies are much blander than people remember, and maybe the ones that should have gone by the wayside, but for some reason weren't, and the more creative ones are the ones that kind of got forgotten about for a while, which is weird. Because Robin Hood was the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 73.
I think so. Hang on.
And every time I hear Robin Hood get brought up, it's always with like the utmost fondness from people.
Yeah, I'm looking at the like sort of list. Yeah. So with 50s, you've got Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, and Sleeping Beauty. And then for the 60s, you've got 101 Dalmatians, Sword in the Stone, and Jungle Book. 70s was Aristocats, Robin Hood, the Winnie the Pooh one, and the first Rescuers film. And then the 80s, if you look at the list, it's like Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company. For Little Mermaid. So it's that, even if you add in the Rescuers as well, there's a lot there that is actually very good that gets ignored. Which I guess is thankful, because then we don't get the live action remake. Thanks, Disney.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, isn't The Little Mermaid kind of considered the start of the Renaissance?
That's how I always heard it.
Yeah. They ignore the Rescuers Down Under, but because it's Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King and Pocahontas and Hunchback and Hercules and Mulan and Tarzan, and then it falls off at Dinosaur. But
that's a shame that Rescuers Down Under gets tossed by the wayside like that, because it's pretty good too.
Mm-hmm.
Much better than the first one.
And of course, this all came about because of wanting to do something akin to the Rescuers. Hence why everybody's mice rats, because part of me now does wonder though if this is part of the inspiration for Flushed Away. Take this plus, I guess, like a Prince and the Pauper style storyline that you get. Then again, I guess there wasn't a frog in The Great Mouse Detective.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I kind of get that vibe.
Mm-hmm. A big booming voiced actor like Vincent Price and Ian McKellen, you know. There's sort of similar things there.
But it also shows that even like peak Vincent Price can't be topped by even the likes of Ian McKellen. Really says something.
And of course, we had somebody in this film that was dead for 19 years. Good old Basil Rathbone as the voice of Sherlock Holmes. They took the audio from like a 66 re-recording that he did for like records of the Red-Headed League, and I think they did a Val Bettin, who voiced Dr. Dawson, had to do like a knockoff Watson, because as Nigel Bruce had died in like the 50s, he wasn't on the Sherlock Holmes record that was recorded in 66, which, to be fair, that was like a year or two before he died, I think. Off the top of my head, I think it was 67 or 68. So yeah, it's not just Peter Cushing being used in Star Wars things. We're getting Basil Rathbone years after he's dead, recreated via not AI, via just down the record shop and going, "Have we got that in stock? Yes, get it, put it on."
And the fact that they're both Disney's doing is also quite funny.
And that's the only reason I think. Well, I think that's the only reason why the mouse himself is called Basil. It's based off books, which I was not aware of until looking into it, and then finding out that they didn't even bother to do a book to like tie in to this around the same time. The last book was like 1982, and they didn't. I guess they just reprinted it in 86 or 87 to the original book in the series, and then lo and behold, they started the series again in 2018. Going I think it was 3 consecutive years. They haven't done a new one since 2020, but like, there is an actual franchise if they wanted to. I mean, I'm not saying Disney Plus needs the content, but I watch Secret Invasion. It needs the content.
It is something that would lend itself pretty easily to a TV series adaptation, like something like Aladdin, Timon and Pumbaa. I had another one in my head. I can't remember what it was. But like something like that, like something episodic, it definitely lends itself to that kind of setup. But I don't know that you would ever, you wouldn't be able to top your villain. Every villain would feel second rate.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that you could sort of mini-series it, because with the original film only being sort of like 74 minutes, if you just trim a bit here and there where need be, you can probably get them sort of hour-long specials for like, I don't know, a holiday period or whatever, or just dump them all in one go.
They should just adapt it, do it 1.5 hour episodes, and do it in the style of Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman.
It is crazy to see how franchise hungry Disney is now, and how much Disney's really milking things. And this is one of their movies that ends with perfect sequel bait, and nothing came of it.
Yeah, not even a direct DVD or VHS that it would have been then.
I mean, the thing is though, like, did they want it? Because this is where we go into the nitty gritty, into the making of it. We'll actually get to the film itself, because I think this is enough of a story in itself, because they were developing this with Ron Miller, who at the time was Disney president. But he left in '84, and in came Michael Eisner, along with Disney, the new Disney Film Division studio chairman, Jeff Katzenberg. This pair of people. So yeah, they weren't happy about the script, so they wanted a rewrite. And then the plan was, okay, it's coming out Christmas of '87, and you've got plenty of time and plenty of budget. And then Eisner went, oh, you know how you had 24 million to make this? You now have 10. And by the way, I want it in July of '86. So we're talking 17 months before what they were hoping. And then the added thing as well is they also, because Young Sherlock Holmes failed, which is also underrated and really good, by the way, if you want to see, that's going to show up sooner rather than later if it hasn't already on the channel. That's why it changed from Basil of Baker Street to Great Mouse Detective, which then led to what became a Jeopardy category, where, and this is where we're going to have our own little game. The animator Ed Gombert wrote a satirical inter-office memo, allegedly by studio executive Peter Schneider, which gave preceding Disney films generic titles. I don't know if this is a pretty easy game, actually, looking at some of these, so I might not. But we've got 7 Little Men Help a Girl, The Wonderful Elephant Who Could Really Fly, The Little Deer Who Grew Up, The Girl with the See-Through Shoes, Two Dogs Fall in Love, Puppies Taken Away, and A Boy, a Bear, and a Big Black Cat.
The girl with the see-through shoes sounds like a murder mystery or something.
It's another one of the it's another one of the Stieg and Millennium trilogy that never got done.
I was gonna say that it also sounds like one of the names of Basil Rathbone's Sherlock movies, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
Or like a Hitchcock mystery.
Yeah, like an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess this also falls into the trend of Disney animations using one big name that you recognize, and the rest being just really good casting. Barry Ingram is brilliant as Basil. Val Bettin, who isn't even British, I wouldn't have known, doing so well as Dr. Dawson.
I mean, if we're gonna talk about how great Barry Ingram is in this as Basil, let's talk about the fact that it feels like a feat in itself that Basil is such a fun character without being overshadowed by what Vincent Price is doing. Is a pretty spectacular feat to accomplish.
Certainly. Yeah, although some of the time you do sort of feel that this is Vincent Price sort of toward the end of his stuff. He isn't as sort of vivacious in his words like he was on the whole reading the Thriller script for Michael Jackson, that would have been 4 years before, right? 82? I think.
That sounds right.
But yeah, then again, we get to hear Vincent Price sing, so hell yeah. And then also Suzanne Polacek that voiced Olivia did a very good job. She does not have a Wikipedia page, so I don't know if she's done anything else.
It's also really impressive that Olivia is an adorable character without being annoying, because it kind of feels like it kind of feels like she's supposed to be annoying a little bit, but she kind of isn't. Or is that just in comparison to the rest of the child annoying characters?
It might be that.
I mean, maybe. I mean, the reason the reason why you realize that like she isn't trying to be annoying that much is when she manages to get control of Toby the dog more than Basil. You know, good old sit and dog doesn't pay attention to Basil, and then as soon as Olivia does it, it's like, oh, I'm sitting down, and Barry's like, damn it.
If only that had been the line.
Yeah. I mean, it's 80s Disney.
I mean, it might
would've been
be.
possible.
If we need to make it
I
darker.
mean, in a movie with a climax as hardcore as this one has, they could have gotten away with damn it pretty easily.
And then, of course, the little tidbit of Alan Young, aka Scrooge McDuck, voicing the father as well. There's a nice little taste of that. Yeah, I mean, it's a simple. Go ahead, guys.
I was just gonna say, I don't know why, but every time I see Olivia's dad, the first person that comes to mind is Gary Oldman.
Have
And I
watched
have no
Oppenheimer as
idea
well.
Yeah, when Olivia's dad got brought up, I had to stifle a laugh because I knew you were going to bring up the Gary Oldman thing because of how true it is.
Nolan is so ashamed he doesn't even name him in the credits until it gets to the main role. There you go. But it's... I do like the sort of... Well, the sort of... I guess the cold open, like the pre-title sequence with the father being sort of kidnapped and obviously showing that he's good at automatons and whatever. But then how it transitions to our narrator, and you know, it shows the main cab of the horse and carriage, and then pans down to good old Dr. Dawson, who's just on the step getting a free ride. The cheeky sod.
Yeah, can we discuss the opening scene?
Yeah.
I always find it so interesting how the opening scene portrays Fidget versus the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Because if you only see the opening scene, you think Fidget's going to be a terrifying character. There's actually also the scene where he's hanging out by the window is kind of creepy. And it seems like lightning follows him everywhere. And then every time he starts talking, we realize how bumbling he is.
And you the only other bit of sinister stuff that I can think that you get is when he's in the sort of baby's cradle thing, and the eyes
That's
show
pretty
up.
terrifying, yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's. But other times he's just like actual comedic relief.
Yeah.
Which really doesn't sort of
Is he?
gel.
Yeah, because it's kind of he and Basil are the characters that are kind of like purely comedic.
Yeah,
everybody else either is darkly or back.
Yeah, everybody else gets serious stuff with them. Yeah, I guess Basil obviously gets serious towards the end with the fight on the clock and all that, but
when he's on death's door, yeah.
Yeah, it's like fur and flesh has just got ripped out of him. But we purposely didn't put blood there because it's for kids.
When that climax is so crazy, I think in my mind as a kid, I created a false memory that there was blood visible, even though there's not. Like I have memories of it being bloody when it isn't.
It's the old Mandela
really
effect.
Cool. What would be really cool is to see that clock tower scene, like when they're going through the gears and stuff, seeing that in like freaking IMAX.
Yeah,
that'd be wild.
Especially with the way they'd especially do that now since they were showing off new animation technology for that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, on the animation front, it's like relatively standard, and then as soon as we get to the clock, this is where most of the budget went, I think. Where we get the sort of 2.5D, I guess. You know, the stuff that looks 3D, but it's actually just 2D.
But I think that actually works in its favor.
Mm-hmm.
Like putting like most of the budget there, because that means with the sort of lower animation or like the less elaborate animation, it's like they actually devoted most of their time to the actual mystery angle. Mystery from Basil's perspective, because obviously we know what's happening, but I like how much of it actually feels like a mystery movie rather than just like another adventure movie. Even though it does have the adventure aspect also, but not too much of it.
Yeah, like even with the aspect of the animating of the Rube Goldberg style machine, at least as Wikipedia, basically Mousetrap, of the everything that's trying to kill them and everything on the Mousetrap. That's animated relatively, traditional 2D. It's only then when you sort of get the sort of, I guess it helps because you're obviously trying to show the rotating cogs and how deadly they can be. So having sort of everything on top of it, 2D on top of the sort of 3D-esque images, makes it actually sort of stand out and makes it probably one of the more memorable bits, just because it's a slight tweak on the animation style.
Were you about to say something else? I thought I heard you building up. Yeah, something I was actually going to mention was something that you mentioned at the beginning, which was the score. It's interesting because I love the score, but if you listen closely, there's like maybe 3 pieces of music in this movie. It's just some of it's sped up and some of it's slowed down, but it all works in its own context.
Well, as it also says on here, the unusually for a Disney animated feature, there was no soundtrack album released at the film's launch. It was only when it got re-released as The Adventures of the Great Mouse Detective in '92 that it actually had the soundtrack sort of come out. And to that extent, it's also obviously got a low number of songs. Really, you've got the 2 songs by Vincent Price, his sort of mastermind sort of thing, and then the one that plays on the record, and then the strip joint scene. Let Me Be Good to You, which apparently Eisner was like, you know who should sing this? Madonna. Yeah, that great 19th century sounding actor / singer. No.
Well, if he wanted Madonna, he would have killed the budget right there.
Thank God for Melissa Manchester.
Was this potentially a domino effect to her ending up in Dick Tracy, since that was Touchstone?
I mean, maybe.
Because it feels so, because there's something Breathless Mahoney like in that performance.
Yeah, she did a song on the Out of Africa soundtrack as well, and then Little Nemo: Adventures in Slumberland, and other stuff which isn't.
With that scene, the thing that kills me the most in that scene is Drunk Dawson.
He is totally off his tits. I'm trying to work out whether that's just the alcohol and he's not used to it, or whether it's actually the drugs that are doing the effect. Is this why, stealing a line from the chef reactions thing I saw on Twitter, is this why you shouldn't put sugar in the beer, because the sugars actually come from some guy called Pablo Escobar?
I think part of it too is the way he's dressed.
It gives off, it enhances the drunken vibe.
Yeah.
Especially eye patch.
And it clearly didn't work long enough, because he's obviously slapped into sort of normal mode once he's got way too drunk and he started the bar fight. Which makes it look like a Western instead. This giant bar fight that happens.
There's still some after effect clearly when he almost gets lost in the pipe.
True, yeah. That's why I should always follow him. Yeah, I find it fascinating that technically this did better at the cinema than Big Trouble in Little China.
I think that's just justice, honestly. I'm not the, I'm not.
I mean, to be fair, it did
I'm
come
one of
out
the very
July.
few in the world.
It came out July 4th weekend. The other films that were ahead of it were the films that had already been out, which were Karate Kid Part 2, Ruthless People, Back to School, Top Gun, Legal Eagles, and Running Scared. Oh, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then the only new film that only just opened ahead of it by about 18,000, sadly, was Psycho 3. You had Psycho 3, Great Mouse Detective, closely followed by About Last Night, Under the Cherry Moon, and then Big Trouble in Little China. Even Under the Cherry Moon did better than Big Trouble in Little China. There we go. And it sort of did well. I think box office wise, I think it's. I'm trying to look at the list. If you add in the original release, along with the. The film grossed about 50 million worldwide, but had a lifetime North American gross of about 39 over the 86 release and the 92 reissue. I'm trying to work out why they would have brought it out again in 92. I'm trying to think of the reasoning.
Well, Rescuers was 91, Aladdin was 92. Could have maybe been like out to kind of
Now that
pump up Aladdin.
they boosted their name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, possibly. The other intriguing thing is, for at least the original release, apparently it was accompanied with Clock Cleaners. The 1937 short. I guess to pad it out to obviously 90 minutes, so it's a bit more favourable for the theatres to show.
Yeah. Remember when animated movies were this long?
Yeah.
And how not bloated they were?
You
That
say
was a
that
great time.
Elemental
I think
just
one-
overtook Spider-Man Spider-Verse 2 in the international box office, amazingly. So it proves that there must be something good there.
I think one thing that helps this movie stay short and stay on pace like that is we don't mess around with a love interest or anything.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
pretty straightforward. This is our story. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we don't really detour.
Yeah. It's very concise.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, when we were talking about telling the story, but what's really interesting is the stuff that they do devote time to. Seems like it might be a detour, but it's actually the kind of the best parts of the movie. Like how this movie's only like an hour and 14 minutes. Like 10 minutes of that, 10 minutes, by the way, is a big fraction of 74 minutes. is just Radigan's introduction.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long scene. And I'm not going to complain about that, and I don't know anybody else that would either.
No. I mean,
'Cause
considering how we've had
in that whole
plenty of
introduction-
films recently that have like not really had a villain or not really given time to build said villain in recent years, having something which really establishes, oh, this is the big bad, you know, even so much as the bit where he's about to lose it on Fidget, where his eyes begin to do the whole crazy warp thing, but then he just like cools himself down. So you just, even there, it's like you get the tease of what he might become when he becomes full on rat.
I do feel like there's an interesting piece of foreshadowing to that. I think it's in the song
Mhm.
when he says he's going to be the. I can't remember the line. As many times I've seen the movie, I can't remember the line now. He's going to be the something in all of Mousedom.
Mhm.
But when he says Mousedom, he looks like unkempt, like he has to fix himself, and it's like it's ironic that while saying the word Mousedom is when his cover starts to get blown a little bit.
Well, because
I think it's
then you get
interesting, too, 'cause
the thing from the other people, like the one guy getting so drunk he sort of implies that he's a rat, and you know, Ratigan's like, no, I'm not a rat, I'm a mouse, I'm different.
I love too how like as an adversary to Basil, he could default to the physical advantages that he has, but he doesn't. The physical advantage doesn't come in until he's lost all patience and has nowhere else to go because he's been outsmarted.
Yeah.
Like I love that because he could like literally like whenever they do the whole mousetrap thing, he could probably just rip them apart right there. But he stays composed, stays proper, and he still wants to play the wit game. But then when all of that's been exhausted, that's when the physical advantage comes out, and you see just if he had gone physical the whole way, the movie would have lasted 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So I
Which to
think it's
some
interesting
extent
that he
is
kind of
fair
keeps
because
a lot of people.
to some extent that's also a fair comparison because a lot of Moriarty Reichenbach Fall references, even going up to the the Cumberbatch and Freeman, the BBC Sherlock, as well as Downey Jr.'s Sherlock, implies that Moriarty is probably physically the better person, but like mentally, who's got the upper hand, sort of thing. And
I just
that's
love that, like his physical advantage, he literally just keeps in his back pocket.
Yeah, it's his own reinforcement.
Yeah. Like I'm gonna outsmart you in this game, and then if I can't, I will just tear the shit out of you.
Yeah, it's probably worth reiterating to anybody watching. This is a problem we've had for a while. If it sounds like we're all kind of talking over each other, there's like a delay we haven't really worked out yet from like when we talk and when Ashley hears us, and I think vice versa. So hopefully it doesn't sound too garbled and all together.
I try and respond directly, sort of after sort of it sounds like you finish, so it sounds at least normal on my end. And then it's just like how it is when we get the reports on satellite on the news, where it's just a person there like, yeah, I'm here, like just that sort of thing.
It's like I'm trying to work out how much time there is where Ashley thinks we're just sitting in silence when we're actually just hearing the rest of his play.
No, I get it. It's probably about 2 or 3 seconds, hopefully, in or around there.
Like 7 seconds alive that they buffer to be able to censor any naughty words or anything.
What I do find fascinating
slapping
though is the Great Mouse Detective title bit only got resurrected with the DVD, well, the special edition DVD, the Mystery in the Mist edition, whatever that means, and the Blu-ray edition that was in 2010, and the Blu-ray in 2012, that actually had it labeled as the Great Mouse Detective, because everything else, be it the VHS and Laserdisc edition originally, and then the old 7 years it's coming out the vault, limited time, in '99, it was just credited as the Adventures of the Great Mouse Detective. We got it back
I was
to
gonna say
normal title. Yes.
I want to say, because my memory remembers really weird and random things, I think it was your 10th birthday that we got the VHS. And I think our VHS says The Adventures of the Great Mouse Detective.
Oh, I'm not
And
sure.
I know I know the Blu-ray that I have just says The Great Mouse Detective.
Even that title hints that there's going to be more. It's just
Yeah,
not called The Adventure of.
that's why I always assumed like it was intended to be a franchise by that title, and then that's why they started changing the title as it went.
Well, it's like, I mean, looking at the sort of the legacy of it, there's a sort of reference to it in Darkwing Duck. Basil and Ratigan were at the Disney parks until they both got retired, like 2004 time. And then otherwise, it's Ratigan's in the Once Upon a Halloween straight to DVD animated thing from like mid 2000s. He's in the Villainous board game. He's in the Disney Heroes mobile tablet thing. And then, interestingly, for Mickey's 75th anniversary, they were going to do a Search for Mickey Mouse film in which Mickey gets kidnapped and Minnie would use Basil to investigate. But as usual, script problems meant nope. You wanted fun? Nope.
I also feel like Ratigan would make a pretty good Kingdom Hearts boss. Like they
Yeah.
should over to that.
I mean, considering how sort of like detective stuff and sort of investigative stuff is in right now, at least in terms of some sort of video games, you'd have thought having like a mystery sort of style level in a Kingdom Hearts would really fit into it.
Yeah. Or I could go with this option too. Just give me a Batman Arkham Asylum type game where I'm Basil and going around and solving mysteries.
Yeah, that sounds a bit tasty. Right. Let's see what we've got here. Because I just realised chat exists. Sorry, chat. I'm coming to you now. We'll talk about what yours got to say. Josie says that this is one of the most underrated Disney films, and Ratigan's such an underrated villain. Yeah, it's like...
Yeah.
To some extent, I mean... It's unfair to compare it, but it's Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in Mission Impossible 3. It's not like he's like the main sort of like I'm gonna beat somebody up like practically every other Mission Impossible film is. Ratigan sort of like got the mental workings to sort of work out how the plot's gonna go successful, because to some extent it basically does. You know, the Queen gets suckered in because she doesn't notice the guards are missing and all that. Even the sort of public, when the robot her sort of makes the greetings and whatever, sort of somewhat buy into it. They only get sus on it all when Basil hijacks the automaton and everything.
As far as what Ratigan's capable of, let us also not forget that his song and his intro to indicate that he has drowned widows and orphans. So that's a lyric that's in there. Whether that's figurative or literal, we could take. But I'm gonna assume by the climax it was literal. He's probably killed widows and orphans.
Let's just talk about how funny it is that essentially Ratigan's plan was defeated at essentially the same level of Jim Carrey hijacking the teleprompter in Bruce Almighty.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, because because like you were saying, the best way to beat Ratigan is to push him to that point.
Yeah.
Is to just irritate him enough.
I mean, he'll
do himself in.
You're gonna walk away with bumps and bruises, but I mean, you'll
bumps and bruises is mild.
Yeah.
And again, drowning widows and orphans. At least the drowning widows part might be just a nod to House on Haunted Hill. I don't know. Because I think was that a pit full of acid or was it just a pit? I'm trying to remember.
I don't. I do not remember.
I just remember him coming back from the dead and his wife falling down the pit, and he was just like, "Well, that's very good. and there's stuff like that. He like didn't care. It was like everybody else gets the money. That'll do.
There's there's actually a video on this channel where I review his House on Haunted Hill, and I can't remember that movie. Weirdly enough.
I only remember it because God knows how many DVDs came out of it because of the old public domain deal, which doesn't even apply over here. So I don't know why there's so many because they're all going to be copyrighted in the UK.
While we're on the topic of how evil Ratigan is, there's a line I wrote down I wanted to remember. I think it's after he set the trap and he's leaving them for dead. And he does his big, dramatic goodbye to Basil because this is the goodbye to he's finally vanquished his enemy and stuff like that. And then in reference to Dawson, he just says, "Sorry, chubby." And that's it.
No. That's why you shouldn't. Yeah, be careful who you make friends with. Josie says, in the neighbourhood I used to live in, there was a pub called Donegan's that later changed to Radigan, so immediately Josie just thought Radigan sounds pretty similar to Rattigan's.
They should put the portrait in that pub where, like, it's the normal portrait, and then somebody says his name, the lights flicker, and the portrait smiles.
Yeah.
Josie mentioning how it was originally supposed to be Basil Baker Street based off of the book series. The Let Me Be Good to You segment was almost cut because, though brief, the lyrics and some animation was considered too risque for a Disney animated feature film, and somehow the animators avoided a PG rating. Yeah, some of that stuff, it's like
smoke and drink.
Yeah.
Some of those mouse were getting a bit too randy. That's all I'm saying.
Not all of them are. I'm not even sure what some of those people
are. Maybe I think somebody's a frog.
Is that what he is? That's who I was thinking of when I was like, they're not all mice, but what are they?
I don't know. The dude that looks like he's from Newsies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a frog.
So the reason the scene got kept in is they appealed to the censors on the grounds that the segment was a cabaret song and it was actually harmless in lyrics, and the character animated singing it is a mouse, not a human, so how can it be sexy or risque? Because you drew it that way, you sons of bitches. It's like Jessica.
I want a Disney short now. Now I want a Disney short that's of that frog showing up in the town and just like getting in with this group and being like.
He's clearly got a heart because when the guy gets eaten by the cat, he is very solemn.
That's when he realized, like, oh man, who the hell did I get involved with?
He's in too deep.
Yeah. It's like Billy Costigan.
Yeah.
I bet you didn't think you'd have a Billy Costigan reference in this discussion.
Didn't see it coming, no.
Basil of Baker Street's named after Basil Rathbone, who played Sherlock in 14 films. It feels more than that. Then again, that sounds about right, because they'd have done probably only a handful, because a lot of them were sort of over the war period, because there were those sort of infamous 2 or 3 that were just like, support your troops, boys! Like, say it with an American voice, Sherlock, why don't you?
Yeah, I've got a DVD set of like 6 or 7 of the Rathbone movies, but I've never been clear on how many there actually are.
Yeah. By strange coincidence, Basil was also a name used by a disguised Holmes in Conan Doyle's The Adventures of Black Peter. I'm hoping that's a ship called Black Peter, because if it is as racist, then thanks, Conan Doyle.
Oh man, Cole's assistant.
There's quite a bit of drinking in this movie. The drinks are drugged, maybe on the side. Rattigan did some drug dealing. And Rattigan doing drug dealing on the side, drug trafficking. Considering how we know about Sherlock, he might have been on drugs as well.
I feel like the drugs is above Rattigan. I feel like the drugs would be Fidget's racket.
Yeah.
And that could be.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he's always in pain.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, my only
Yeah, and
leg.
it's Fidget is on something.
Mhm.
And we see him in the bar putting alcohol on top of whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's why Fidget's all fucked up.
Fidget runs the drugs. I think Radigan's above that. He's more focused on taking over Mouston.
One of the few Disney films to take place entirely at night. Trying to think.
Oh wow, it does.
Yeah, there's not.
Yeah, we
single
never
frame of
actually
daylight.
see the transition from like day to night at any point. Because we know it's got to be over at least a couple of days, because when Ratigan has the automaton maker first, he says, you know, I've only got 1 day left. And then when he actually goes and does all the stuff, it's like, oh, I'm 15 minutes late, sort of thing. So it clearly happens over a couple of days. So maybe the daytime scenes happen inside, you know, Holmes's office and whatever, maybe.
Or maybe they all slept during the day.
That's another effective way to make it concise too, is to make the time frame it's set in so small.
Mm-hmm. John Cleese was the original choice for the role of Basil.
That would have probably been fun, but I can't imagine it any other way now.
There's only one time when John Cleese is Basil, and that's the original Fawlty Towers. I am fearing for this bloody remake that's coming out either later this year or next year. Whatever the hell that's going to be. The box that Olivia sits on to cry is Gaston's liver pills, which was a reference to the father of one of the artists.
Yeah, later Disney villain.
Yeah.
So either the father was called Gaston, or taking the liver pills caught a lot of gas to come out. I don't know. This was one of the last movies to have the end to appear at the end of the movie. Most of Hollywood had long abandoned this tradition in the 70s. The only holdout was Disney, that kept doing it into the 80s, and by the time the 90s rolled around, even they just ditched it and went black screen credits.
I remember how out of place the end feels at the end of A Few Good Men. It sounds right. Everybody was abandoning it by then.
As Ratigan is ranting about how much he hates Basil, we see that he's got a voodoo doll in the shape of a mouse and a deerstalker. The doll bears a
That
striking
image
resemblance to Basil, not as he appears in this film, but as he appears in the illustrations in the book on what the film is based. Oh, so a bit of a nod to the original design. That's a bit nice.
I was just about to say, that image of the voodoo doll always creeped me out when I saw it. I think because I didn't quite know what it was when I was a kid. And also the fact that if Basil's appearance had been slightly altered, that must have been part of it too.
Everything changed when you saw Live and Let Die.
Actually, Child's Play introduced me to...
Oh, was it that? I keep forgetting that had voodoo in it. I just thought it was the doll. Rather than actual, like a voodoo doll. Dumbo's featured as a toy figurine in the toy shop scene. Basil was first modelled on Bing Crosby, but the animators eventually took inspiration from Leslie Howard.
That makes sense.
I find it weird to try and go the Bing Crosby route. Did they just see the penis song from bloody Meaning of Life and they thought, oh, he looks like bloody Sherlock? I'd have thought you wanted, like, he's called Basil. Try to make him look like Basil Rathbone. I mean, you've got his voice in the film, like.
because I feel like there'd be a very easy way to do some animated variation on Basil Rathbone's face because it's just kind of shaped that way.
Yeah.
I don't. That's not too insulting to say, right?
I mean, we've already got a furore that people are angry about blooming Bradley Cooper's nose in Maestro, playing the composer. Bergman. No,
Bernstein,
I mean, yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, because as soon as I saw sort of like the design for Basil, I've seen it plenty of times in the mobile game as well. It's just like, okay, tall, slender, prominent nose doesn't mean it has to be sort of big. To me, I thought it was all about the Ravba, but no. Josie mentions how it was released originally with the 37 short clock cleaners. Peter Pan and the Darling Children fly over Big Ben. It'd be funny if they did so as Basil was solving a mystery. Or better yet, they joined together to solve a mystery. Ratigan and Captain Hook. I mean, rats leaving the sinking ship. It writes itself! That just came to mind now. I just realised.
Are we just gonna make that official canon now? Because it's too.
We can if we do get Peter Pan 2. Oh wait, we already did. It was that bloody awful video game. Peter Pan 3? Huh? Considering how all the other Peter Pans flopped that have been live action since. And Peter Pan and Wendy for that matter.
Yeah.
Norway banned the film for children under 12. Why? The studio considered releasing it straight to video there because videotapes weren't regulated at the time. The black market was just the regular VHS market. Danish censors required 30 seconds of cuts, but Finland and Sweden were just like, nah, we're alright with it. So half of Scandinavia was like, it's alright. And the other half was like, no! Get away! The power of Christ compels you! Like, what's that about?
I already love the movie, but it also does kind of give it this new badass quality to know how many like different cuts of it there had to be.
Originally, Olivia was going to be older and be a love interest of Basil, but there was then changed to be little so the audience would gain more sympathy for her. Perhaps when she's older. No! No, Josie! We do not want a Leonardo DiCaprio situation here. Damn!
Wow, what
Yeah,
did I miss?
they were gonna. Olivia was originally gonna be a love interest instead of a little girl.
Nah, little girl works better.
Yeah, I was gonna say the thing you were just saying, where like lack of a love interest really helps this movie.
I would rather him. I'd rather her be older because it's funnier that he gets annoyed with.
Yeah. What's also really interesting is you would think sequel bait woman that comes in at the very end, like if they had made a sequel, she would probably be the love interest. But then it's like, wait, if we're going the detective, like the regular detective route, that might have been a femme fatale that walked in.
I'm trying to remember what her name was. Whether they, I don't think they introduced her by name, because I was like, okay, how close is this name going to be to Irene Adler? Because if that's the case, we know where this is going. The last Disney full-length animated film ever to be set in the UK, not counting Pocahontas, because it took place in England during the opening song, but the majority is obviously set in Virginia. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think what now was Fox, which now would be Disney, whether there's any that would fall into that. I don't think Flushed Away... I think Flushed Away is Universal, isn't it?
I was gonna say DreamWorks. I'm not sure.
It is
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Ratigan kills Bartholomew in the pit and the Pendulum, and Vincent Price's character tries to kill a man called Bartolome. So is that why it was called? Oh, I see. Yeah. So that may be just part of a nod there. If there was an animated feature in 86-87, Josie says the nominees could have been American Tail, Hayao Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky, Great Mouse Detective, When the Wind Blows, and the Transformers movie. And that would have been a damn good list. All of them are really good.
I would say that or Castle in the Sky. Well, this would have been too good to be true. I mean, I love Castle in the Sky, but I don't love American Tail. I got very bored with it as a kid. I've talked before in the Q&As about how Don Bluth just wasn't for me.
Do you think if you would watch it now, then
I don't know. I can always test it out, but
yeah, God.
Bry comes in. Hey, Bry. Bit of context where Disney Animation was at the time. After Black Cauldron failed at the box office, Eisner considered shutting down the studio, but it was Roy E. Disney that encouraged him not to. So, on top of the budget being shortened and the release date getting pushed way forward, the animators also had to get moved from the Burbank studio to a tiny studio in Glendale. And basically, if this movie failed, you wouldn't have had Little Mermaid or Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast or anything, because Disney Animation would have got shut down.
And that's what's funny to me. Like, oh, this movie failed. You set it up to fail. You cut the budget. You moved the release date. What did you expect to happen? That these are the guys making millions of dollars, and the people that actually make this stuff.
At this rate, it makes you wonder whether Katzenberg wanted it to fail because he was real getting ideas of what was going on with 3D animation, considering how big he was with the early bits of, Toy Story and all that in the early 90s before he went off to DreamWorks and all that. Did he have is this an inside line?
What is it with them making? What is it with them making some of their best movies by accident? Because there's the story of this, and there's that story of they made The Lion King because they were killing time until Pocahontas.
because rich people aren't rich because they're smart. Vince McMahon once said that he saw nothing of value in Stone Cold. Like, that's the kind that we deal with here with rich people. They're so oblivious.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know a good idea if it came up and bit them on the penis.
Jeremy Irons has a good line in Margin Call about something very similar, where he's at the top of the chain and he basically flat out says, "Not because I'm smart."
Yeah.
Josie says another film I find underrated is Oliver and Company, and loves American Tail.
Yeah, which we haven't talked about.
I think, honestly, one of the best parts about Oliver,
Yeah.
like the Billy Joel song. Billy Joel song slaps.
Yeah.
Slaps.
Josie also
and just
put.
the idea of
Go ahead.
It's interesting that, to my understanding, we've had at least a few movie adaptations of Oliver, one of which is the Best Picture winner. But it's interesting that it wasn't until '88 that we got one that was like specifically targeted at kids, because it feels like the story kind of sets up for you can tell the story that way very easily and adapt it that way, and still have the villain get hit by a fucking drain.
Josie.
If you go back and look, there's some like Disney deaths back in the day.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned yet, have we, that the Big Ben climax is the waterfall thing from the books, right?
Yeah, well, I
Where
sort
they
of
both go
referenced it because of the whole physical fight, and I mentioned how it's sort of comparable to all the... In every adaptation I've seen of a Reichenbach Fall incident, at least in movies and to some extent TV, it's always been the case that Moriarty physically is superior. Admittedly, in Game of Shadows, because Sherlock sort of working hurt and injured. But in every sense, it's sort of, to some extent, it's always been that he's outsmarted them. Like, he managed to sort of realize, well, if there's a propeller on the bit that you kicked Fidget off of, I think that's
I think what's also
a good opportunity to use it.
I think what's also interesting about the climax that we haven't talked about yet is most climaxes are good and evil standing off in a fight. This isn't a fight. Basil's just trying to get out and survive.
Yeah.
Like, he does not fight back at all. He's just like, and the look on his face is animated real well too, where he's like, I done fucked up. I gotta figure out how to get out of here.
Yeah, it's one of those things that kind of, because you're so used to like the way Disney heroes are, it actually doesn't even occur to you till in the moment of, oh yeah, there's nothing that ever indicated Basil was a fighter. No. And that's because he's not.
Yeah, and his number one thought was, I've got to get away from this. I'm going to die. I don't stand a chance. It's like he poked the bear too long, and then the bear came back. But then once again, when he survives with the propeller thing, it's his smarts that helps him survive, because Radigan's gone over the edge.
Yeah.
Literally and mentally.
And to some
I just think it's
extent,
interesting. There's no defiant moment for him. His defiance is just that he survived.
Yeah.
to some extent as well, that moment of like him just trying to get away. Part of me sort of, now because I'm overanalyzing it, because you've put the idea in my head. Thanks, Chris. Is, did he want to get away because he wants to face Ratigan again another day? Because he knows he's going to show up again? Because he's been trying and to stop him every time. Even when you get the sort of the gun bullet, microscope scene, when he seems dejected of hope because the ballistics are not exactly the same.
I think honestly too, it could be just he was so focused on beating him mentally that he didn't even realize that a physical fight could be possible. Like, he probably never thought anything of it, and then Radigan comes out, disheveled, clothes gone, and he's like, "Oh my god, I picked a fight with a Hulk."
Yeah, because they're arch enemies, it makes you wonder if Basil has. I mean, obviously he alludes to the fact that he knows what he is, but has Basil seen the Wrath before this?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's why we needed more movie.
Josie mentioned I love American Tail because Bry said, though the movie did successful and critical praise, it was actually American Tail produced by Spielberg that did better generally at the box office. While they were looking for the voice of Basil, the crew watched Champagne for Caesar to look at Ronald Colman's performance. But ironically, it was by watching that and seeing Vincent Price's supporting role in that basically led him to get the role rather than Coleman, which is interesting. And although he wouldn't have been a good choice for Basil, they knew it had to be Ratigan, and that's how Vincent got his role.
I'm trying to think. Where he rips his cape away when it gets caught in the gear and he starts chasing Basil. Does Vincent Price have another line after that?
Yeah, there's no escape this time, Basil.
Oh, okay.
Is that the only one?
Yeah, because that's what I was kind of thinking, like, where that takes over, like, all eloquence and decorum's gone.
Yeah, there's a growl in his voice now that wasn't there before.
Josie mentions as well, to you, Chris, can you come up with a sequel in the form of an LA noir or a political conspiracy thriller?
Oh man, just put Basil in Chinatown.
Like basically Rango kind of remade Chinatown.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I don't want to remake the 2J. Although watching Basil explode would be funny. Man, I don't know. I would love to see Basil uncover like a government conspiracy.
Yeah.
Like, that would be pretty cool. Like, kind of stumble ass backwards into it.
Yeah, even if it wasn't like a remake of Chinatown, something relatively close to Chinatown would still be pretty effective.
Or maybe even like something maybe like Parallax View or something like that. Like something like 70s political movie.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully have another ending, but
Yeah.
that would be an interesting
Or
one.
maybe even another adventure with Ratigan as like a prequel where Ratigan is trying to. Well, I
It's
mean, that's kind of the plot of this
kinda-
one.
Him replacing the Queen with a robot kind of feels like the G-rated version of a political assassination.
Yeah, kind of.
Like, just replace that plan with that plan,
Hmm.
and that's an interesting way to look at the story of this movie.
Yeah.
Josie also mentions a Great Mouse Detective Bosch crossover, Great Mouse Detective Monk crossover, or even a Great Mouse Detective Columbo crossover. Mark Ruffalo's free.
That one almost seems the most appropriate.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Barry Ingham co-starred in 16 plays for the Royal Shakespeare Company, opposite the Judi Dench. Whatever happened to her? And Ingham based Basil's voice on Leslie Howard as Professor Higgins from Pygmalion. That was the inspiration, apparently.
That makes sense.
Take into that what you will. Bry also mentions, although I don't like AI, AJ, you might get a kick out of this. You can find an AI cover of Squidward singing "Goodbye So Soon" on YouTube.
My favorite is Kermit singing Redbone. I mean, I think that's an actual person and not AI, but still, it took me a second. I wasn't sure if Brian hates AI the Thing or AI the Spielberg movie.
Or just in general, I don't know. Bry also says, by the way, I wasn't a fan of this movie. I didn't like it, but it's just
Who said that?
Bry.
Oh, fuck off, Brian.
Whoa!
Oh, you always have summer school.
We had to have one controversial moment.
That's the crossover we need. We need Basil to help out shoot.
I was thinking, at least on the political thriller front, you'd have to sort of recast it to some extent, but I could imagine like maybe Basil and the Doctor being the nice guys and the nice guys, because it's not like too sexually fueled, because it's mainly just about like dodgy car shit and all that.
Oh man, when you said the Doctor, I thought you were talking about doing a Basil and Doctor Who crossover.
I mean, we've had Doctor Who and Sherlock references, I think. So.
I don't know anything at all about Doctor Who, really, but for some reason that just sounded right.
I mean, you know, you've got Elementary, My Dear Watson, and Wibbly Wobbly Timey Wimey. It just fits.
If they did revive Great Mouse Detective as a series, maybe it's just because of the show, but I really feel like they should try to get Benedict Cumberbatch to voice Basil.
It's one of those things that seems almost too obvious, but then it's like, if it's there, why not?
Yeah, and you know who I would get for Dawson? Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, I was afraid you were gonna say Martin Freeman. I definitely dig the Giamatti idea.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to be British. He could be American.
He was on Downton Abbey. Why not?
Oh, okay, fair enough.
He's already been in that territory.
Oh, Bri has also responded to you, AJ. Do you want me to send you to the brig?
I've got your villain for you. He could be just as iconic as Vincent Price with voice. And hear me out. The villain should be Michael Wincott.
He's like mostly in voice work now.
He
does like a lot of video game voice work.
Michael Wincott should be your villain.
That'd be fantastic. God, Michael Wincott could play like a live action Moriarty even.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Right. I think with that, my final thoughts, and then I'll pass it over to you guys so we can deal with the 4 second delay. Generally, yeah, I really enjoyed this. Not enough to make me get Disney Plus, but enough that if it gets cheap on Amazon, I might actually buy it rather than getting it via other means when it isn't $11.99. Does Disney know what sales are? Clearly not.
No, they don't.
But yeah, it was a really it was another fun Sherlock thing that I've now caught up on for the first time in a while. Considering how, like, the most recent Sherlock one I saw was the Peter Cook and Dudley Moore one, which was... That's a thing. That won't come to Movie Club. That will go to the pits of hell. Although the one that I do want to bring to Movie Club soon could also go in the pits of hell, but for different reasons. It's not Sherlock related. But yeah, I'm pleased that I managed to get to see it again, because it's one that gets very little broadcast on any channel over here. Again, barely any of the old school animated stuff does. It's all either the live action stuff or pretty much anything from maybe Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast onwards. Yeah, everything that sort of they could put on that's old, they don't, because so many different channels have different rights, so you lose track of where everything's going. So yeah, all in all, thumbs up. AJ, I'll go to you, and then Chris, you can follow after I have a drink.
Yeah, it's just always been one of my favorite animated movies, I think. And I think it's just something that I can always go back to, not just because it's so great and I love it so much, but because it's nice and short. Like, I can just literally watch it whenever I'm in the mood to, which is random and kind of awesome. Like, I probably watch this I'd say at least 3 times a year. It ends up in the Blu-ray player, just randomly. And so I've always loved it. And I just love how, like, it's not afraid to go dark. And it kind of sets up this whole, I wish we still had this regularly in animation. But yeah, and the way it utilized the sort of expanding ways of animation is really impressive, particularly with that climax. So I just love everything about it. So.
Yeah, I love the grittiness, the 80s-ness of it. I feel like this movie is a product of 80s kids movie with everything that it gets away with. So I think it was made at the perfect time. I think if you made it today, it wouldn't be a special.
Yeah, like it
would be 2 hours and Basil would have a love interest and Radigan wouldn't be nearly as violent.
It makes perfect sense that this was right after the Black Hole.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And it's one of those things too where, like, we've talked about how it's a shame they never had a follow-up or anything, but I think there's also something to having a product where people wish there was more.
Yeah.
Rather than giving them more and smearing it up all over the wall.
We really talked about sequel stuff. I do also kind of love that it's standalone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like bled dry.
Yeah, I agree, because it doesn't even have any, like, Disney has a lot of, like, direct to DVD, like, knockoff of people imitating them. There's not even a knockoff. Like, it's its own thing. But that's pretty much it. I just think it's really good. The climax goes a lot harder than it needs to. I think it's a movie that you can pick apart and pick through layers for a while. I'm pretty sure there's layers we didn't tap into.
There is another video on this channel where I did it. I did it as a versus with Cooper and God, like a few years.
So, that's your lot for this movie club. Movie club wise, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Monday the 4th of September, because I don't want it clashing with the AEW stuff. which is lucky because this sort of because they're doing 2 shows in 2 weeks. It's going to be really fun watching that for the next couple of weeks. But yeah, 2 weeks time.
Yeah, that was dumb. I don't know why they didn't do like a two deal with those. Like if you buy both, you get them at a discounted rate or something. I guess AEW's also never heard of sale.
Thanks, Warner Bros. You've done it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just over 2 weeks, we'll be back, and I will have listened to King Crimson's Court of the Crimson King for all of those 2 weeks as I prepare for Children of Men. Oh, that will be fun. And it's got that Hoppy Polar track from, I can't remember the Icelandic singers. I'll remember by the time I get to the thing in a couple of weeks.
I can see their name, but I can't pronounce it.
I know the track's Hoppy Polar, and I can't think. I can think of the really stupid name of the track because it's in Icelandic language, but I can't think of the artist.
It was in every trailer ever, and then we bought a suit.
Yeah.
And Penelope, the Richie.
Just like in the House in a Heartbeat from 28 Days Later, that was in every single trailer afterwards as well.
And Kick-Ass.
So yeah, but before that, myself and AJ will be here Tuesday at the usual time of 6 Eastern.
I hope I don't forget.
I'll get Owen to send you a message or whatever to make sure you don't forget. I knew it wasn't tomorrow because that's you travelling back, so you know I've got that sorted with some lineup for that. So there we'll be there with the Q&As. We'll probably discuss some of the big movie stuff, like how the BBC just aired a Netflix movie as a premiere. Because I want to mention that because that's freaking ridiculous. I wonder how many more Netflix films we're getting, but we'll see. And then other stuff in terms of the channel. I've got more gaming stuff and snack stashes in the works, some of which are still need to go up from last week, but we'll be catching up on them over the next day or two. Most of them are sort of ready to go. I'm just trying to remember what days they're all scheduled for. AJ's got movie reviews and verses in the works, mainly for the deluge that is sort of September and October time.
A couple of things were actually mentioned in this video that are getting a versus together that I will probably be shooting in the next few days.
Now try and work out which ones.
They're of the Disney variety. They were in that list somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. The other one that was in the list but wasn't on the Wikipedia page that was in the note, you know, in terms of the simplifying the titles. This one's a bit of a cheating one because it says Robin Hood with animals. Can't think what that is. Owen's content and whatever, the sip and snacks you can also catch up on, and Voice of Liberty content and all that sort of stuff. And then shout outs to you, Chris, and the podcasts that you've got.
Yes, the Figures and Flippy Shit Wrestling podcast on YouTube every Sunday. Spotify's on hold because we're having some technical difficulties with that, but you can still catch the videos on Sunday. And I go on a rant there about the AEW 2 pay-per-view system, so you can check that out as well. And also at Instagram.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you can lead off the socials.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Hunt's Toys on the gram.
Yeah, Chris Hunt's Toys. Which I haven't done any for a while, but I will be in a couple weeks.
Toys will be hunted. It's going to be like Brian, whatever his name is from Taken.
Mhm.
He's going to get on
Brian
the phone.
Mills.
I know where you are, Batman
'cause we'll-
retro figure. I will find you,
We'll be in.
and I will put you in my collection.
For payback weekend. Yeah, we'll be in Pittsburgh for WWE Payback that weekend, so I'm gonna do some toy hunting. in Pittsburgh.
Right. And they say that payback's a bitch. So if the show's bad, that's your tagline for the podcast.
Well, the show's a little over 2 weeks away, and there's not one match announced for the card. So there you go.
Just like AEW.
Yeah.
I can be found on Twitter /X. I know I wasn't going to mention it, but I find it funny that I can just suddenly go X, as if I'm like some sort of possessed fool. So that's going to happen now. Not on the recorded videos, just on live things, as it gets a pop from a cheap pop. At Ash is my name UK. Although most of it's competitions and just me finding hopefully some stuff to maybe lighten your day. Like a guy drilling into a fuel tank. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I think I just liked that rather than retweeted it when he set the whole place ablaze, because what an idiot. And then I'm trying to work out whether Bry said it on purpose, saying, "Oh, AJ, do you want me to send you to the Brig?" Because if I think of Brig, I think of Keith Richards. And just like Keith Richards, he cannot be killed by conventional weapons. And he can't be found on social media. I did that in the wrong order. Both. Damn it, where's my Escobar? So, with that, thank you to Josie and Bry. And those of you that didn't watch live, you watch it on archive. We'll see you in a day or two. Well, me and AJ will see you in a day or two. We'll see Chris hopefully in a few weeks as we talk about Michael Caine looking like a hippie. And until next time, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, that's all we got to say about that.